Just cast fly on us, and then we'll be able to bypass all of the pit traps and all of the spike traps. Oh, that's a lot of owl bears. Are you guys sure we can handle them all?
You bet we can. Hey, Wizzy, how about some hypnotic pattern action? And then we just surround them one at a time and stab them until they're all dead.
Oh, couple spellcaster! I hate spellcasters! Run away! Run away! Can't our wizard cast silence and nullify that wizard?
Yep, or darkness. Holy crap! 2 red reses? We're screwed!
That's a good point. Now that's pretty cool. With our wizard, I barely have to swing my axe. That's more time that I can play with my action figures.
Welcome to the DM Lair. I'm Luke Hart, and I've been a Dungeon Master since high school. On this channel, I give practical Dungeon Master advice that you can implement at your game table. Now today I'm bringing my buddy Joe back on the channel to discuss some of the most problematic spells in D&D and how a Dungeon Master can deal with them. That is, without simply shutting the spell down completely, because that's no fun. We're talking about problematic spells in Dungeons & Dragons, or spells that DMs hate, or whatever, and how Dungeon Masters can deal with them. So what exactly do we mean by problematic spells? Like, what's the problem?
So imagine you've spent a little bit of time setting up your dungeon. Let's say you put 4 like demons hiding up in the rafters, and your wizard walks into the room, casts 1 spell, and banishes all the creatures, and now waits them 1 minute, and they are gone.
This sounds familiar, like a 7th level banishment that takes care of 4 white Abishai, like that.
Yeah, like exactly like that.
Huh. I wonder who would have done something like that.
Ted.
I think Ted watches my videos, dude.
Yeah, I know. I'm. You're gonna lose 1 subscriber.
Ted, we like you, dude. You're a great player. No, we actually do like you, Ted.
Yes, we do. So I'm a dungeon master, and I have been thoroughly pissed off so many times by the same old group of spells.
Okay.
Just a short list of spells that will completely ruin my game.
Yeah.
And over and over, to the point where your group has gotten to dysfunction, lost a group over it.
You've lost a group over some of these spells?
Yeah, over some of these techniques.
So these aren't just spells that are just like, but these are spells that like can break your game, like ruin your game then.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. If they're used over and over again, it sucks everything out of the game.
So it's really the overuse and abuse of these spells we're about to talk about that's the problem, right?
Right.
We're going to go through about 6 or 7 different spells where we kind of break down how to handle them, like why it's a problem and how to handle it, But I think there's probably an overriding way to handle problems like these, besides just specifically how you address specific spells, right?
Yes, and that is talk to your players.
Talk to your player. Why don't you just kill the player? I mean, I think this is like a theme, right? Like if you go on Reddit or Facebook, right? I just spat at you, but if you go on Reddit or Facebook, you're going to find a theme of just kill the player. I think they usually say kill the character, but they mean kill the player.
Right. And so it's unfortunate, but the laws in the United States forbids that.
It's unfortunate.
So the second best thing you can do is kill the player. Character. Yes. Character.
The character, right.
But at the same time, you don't want to, if it's a player you want to keep, a player you want to have around, you want them to have fun. Right. But you don't want it to ruin the rest of the game. Right. So killing his character just because you're having issues with a spell doesn't mean you should just go flat out kill him. Shut him down in the ultimate way.
Right. Because ultimately, like, you're not actually solving the problem with that spell. You're creating a second problem, a player that's pissed off at you.
Yeah.
That's it's not going to really help things.
And there are ways to deal with these individual spells. It's not impossible.
Right, but the first step is talking to your player.
Yep.
See if you can come to a mutual agreement. Hey, this spell is a little overpowered. It's disrupting the campaign, and people aren't having fun anymore. Can we come to an agreement on how we could change this spell, or maybe we could just agree that you don't use it quite so much, or in that manner? Some sort of conversation and a mutual agreement that can kind of bring things back into the line of everybody's having fun.
Yeah, that can be the easiest solution.
Yeah.
But the ways that we're going to discuss a little bit later are ways to make it more engaging. But it may also require you to talk with your players because you're going to bring on some new ideas online that they might be unfamiliar with. You haven't set precedents for them. They might be caught off guard by them. So before you like go hog wild with what we're going to discuss here, just talk with your players a little bit. Say, hey, I was thinking about adding this component to the game. It should add a dynamic
Got that?
thread to it.
Pound that out.
Yeah. just for the record, people, this is a medical issue that I have, and Luke here is making fun of me for my medical issue.
I am. It's true.
I've had a surgery in my esophagus, which closed the thing. It makes it difficult for me to burp, and Luke is making fun of me.
I am. Occasionally I punch him in the chest just for kicks. It exacerbates the problem.
So this is the kind of DM we want you to be.
Yes. All right, so I think we're ready to talk about these spells, right? So we're about 6 or 7 different spells. The first one we're going to talk about is Fly.
Yeah.
So we all know what Fly allows you to do, right? Why is that a problem?
So this is a problem for a lot of dungeon masters. They just don't know how to deal with it. They just didn't plan for the characters to start flying at 5th level. But it's basically hard-coded into Dungeons & Dragons that things start flying at 5th level.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get Fly before that. I mean, there's only a few ways to get it at 1st level, and that's specifically...
Aarakocra, variant tieflings, which, by the way, are all they are illegal according to Adventure League rules. So that tells you something.
Yes.
The designers knew a little something. But anyway, let's get open a can of worms.
So the dungeon masters have problems dealing with Fly, but there are things that you can do, and then there are things that you shouldn't do to address the problem of Fly.
Yeah. So like, what are the anti-patterns? What shouldn't you do?
So, I'll tell you a little story. I was playing
story time.
So I was playing my little Harry Potter character flying around on his broom.
What was his name?
His name was Morminx.
Morminx.
Yes, and he had a familiar named Twix.
You know, back in the day, they used to have these shirts that said, "Don't tell me about your character." You know,
I know.
Because players would come up to people at conventions and just run their ears off, telling them about their stupid PCs that nobody cared about.
No, I know this. Nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to hear about the time I killed Lolth. Nobody.
They don't care. It's only fun for
5
you.
crits, everybody. 5 crits.
Nobody
in a row.
cares.
5 crits.
Fly.
It was
the Fly
so
spell.
amazing.
Okay, let's just cut this.
Yep. All right. So the Fly spell. So my character Morminx was flying around.
Yeah.
And it had a bunch of thugs come running into the alley to go after him. There were other players, and the thugs could reach the other players fairly easily because, well, they're melee combatants.
Yeah.
By and large, but I'm the warlock. And I didn't want to get clubbed because my armor class is
low.
Like, I think I'm wearing leather armor, so it's
14 or something, 12. Okay.
Yeah, so it was abysmal.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to be out of combat just a little bit. So next thing you know, the thugs are pulling out net guns.
Net guns?
Yeah.
Who just walks around with net guns?
So pulls out steampunk style, boom. I'm like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Running Man getting netted.
Yeah.
And basically taken out of the combat entirely.
Yeah.
So because I was flying and I wasn't able to, wasn't in reach of their melee attacks, the Dungeon Master decided that, well, it's not fun for me, I'm going to make it not fun for you.
So he just shut you down.
Yeah.
100% shut you down. Boom, you're done.
Yep.
And it was kind of unrealistic. He was just on the fly. I mean, I'm okay with adjusting things on the fly, but net guns on, like, low-level mooks is a little bit too much, perhaps.
And the fact that we couldn't collect the nut guns after the fact.
Oh. Why not?
Well, they're too complicated to use by us mere mortals.
But they're thugs. They're like Intelligence 8 thugs.
Right, yeah. So this is definitely something don't do. Don't invent something on the fly to shut your player down and take him out of the picture just because he's flying.
Yeah.
Right? Better, there's much better ways of dealing with that. And that the simplest thing is just give your mooks range attacks.
Yeah.
If they don't have range attacks, give them a short bow.
Right.
Crossbow. That allows that player to be endangered.
Right, and if you're flying, there's no cover usually.
Yeah.
Usually you're open and exposed. You know,
Right.
that's a problem. And most mooks should have ranged attacks of some sort.
Yep.
I can see the counter argument that this is like, well, what about my Tyrannosaurus Rex, Joe?
Right.
little T-Rex bow. Like, what are we doing here?
Right, beasts and things like that.
Yeah,
well,
undead. Yeah,
those skeletons oddly have short bows.
yeah. That's a good point.
Zombies.
Zombies throw each other.
There's nothing that says a zombie can't be like throwing his arm at you.
Then it becomes a crawling claw attached
Oh,
to you.
geez.
It hits you and it's a crawling claw. That definitely clipped the audio.
Just
Write that down. That's a good idea. That's a great idea, actually.
I know, that's going to be fun.
The zombie rips its own head off, and just hurls it at you.
Yeah,
and if
gargoyle.
it misses and goes back down again, it goes over, gets its head, and just throws it at you again.
Or Vargoyle, it's actually a Vargoyle and he throws it at you. And it's not does the kiss attack, right?
That's perfect, man.
So modifying your monsters, your beasts, and things like that to give them a small ranged attack. So there are a lot of beasts out there, like the giant porcupine that can shoot its quills, or manticores and things like that.
Yeah.
Have ranged attacks.
Yeah.
But if you want to play that T-Rex that's running around and not being able to do that, maybe give him a super leap, right?
Hulk jump.
Yeah, Hulk jump. Effectively the monk power, right?
Yeah.
You can do things like that. So he has a little bit of extra grabbing power.
Yeah.
Now, if that seems a little unreasonable, there are other detriments, or other things you can do to deal with fly.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost is lower the ceiling, right?
Just lower the ceiling?
Yeah. So
Bring the architects in to solve that problem?
yeah. So the dungeon now has a 5-foot high ceiling, or 6.5 foot, or 8-foot ceiling.
Well, even a 10-foot ceiling solves it, because if you're in that square there, the people below you can still hit you.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. And so if your dungeon has a 10-foot high ceiling, suddenly the flying character can't really fly out of the way. Yes, he has a lot of movement abilities up high, but he's still easy to reach in melee combat.
Right.
Sometimes lowering the ceiling isn't an option, like you're outside.
Yeah.
But in a forest, you can still lower the ceiling by creating a thick canopy, which could be like triple bad, difficult terrain to fly through.
Sure, absolutely.
You can also put things...
And you can't see crap. In a thick canopy, you can't see but like 5 or 10 feet in front of you.
Right, you would be obstructing your vision.
Yeah.
Not to mention, there might be critters hiding up there,
Yes.
or poisonous plants. If you're from where I'm from, we've got poison ivy everywhere.
Oh, dude, I've had some poison ivy problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got it everywhere. I mean, it's gorgeous in the fall. It turns that hyper pink color, but
It's horrible.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
So
I imagine too, like if you're outside and you're flying like 100 feet up in the air, people for like 100 miles away can see you. Imagine if there's a plane up in the sky, you see it, and it's like over Texas, and you can see it. You know what I mean?
So disincentivizing flying up high. So the player goes 30 feet off the ground. The beast can't get to him, but he's 30 feet and you're on a plane, right? Or on the top of a hill. Well, that person will be visible for very, very far away, possibly attracting aerial
There's a clutch of wyverns flying over there. They just spotted you, and they're beadlining for you. Yeah.
And say if you're in dragon territory, that is a very bad move.
Totally.
Actually, silhouetting yourself at the top of a hill would be a very bad move in dragon territory.
Could be, yeah.
Not to mention if your evil bad guy is watching the players with any sort of like crows or other things, well, you've just given away your position.
Yeah, totally.
You might as well just light a signal fire.
Another solution we had was enemy spellcasters.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to reoccur, we're going to say over and over again, is the inclusion of enemy spellcasters. It seems a bit unfair and a bit weird that your spellcasters, your party, walk in constantly are using spells, but your orcs and your kobolds and your armies and masses, they have no spell power back.
Right.
It really seems to be offsided.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking is we can add spells to the existing creatures.
Yeah, so when we're talking about custom monsters and stuff like that, there's got to be a way to streamline that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just going to create custom monsters for every single encounter in every dungeon. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, no. So what you do is you just pick one of your monsters in a particular group, and you go into the back of the monster manual, and you see the cultist. The cultist has a tiny little spell list. It's a CR2, right? So you just take that spell list and you throw it on top of your monster.
Or like the priest, or
the
or
priest.
like there's There's an apprentice in Volos.
Yep,
His
and
spells
then-
kind of suck though.
Yep, and then there's the mage, and then
Yeah.
if you look at Kobold Press, they got a bunch of other NPC spell lists for
Okay.
the Evoker, Necromancer, and all of these spell
Yeah, those
lists
are Volos. Volos has a lot of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of those are really fun. And so just take a look at the CR of the monster you're stealing from, and the CR of the monster that you're going to copy and paste it to,
Yeah.
and
It's something that's kind of even the same.
yeah, get it kind of even. But if it's, this one's a CR 1/2 and this one's a CR 2, well, just take the whole priest, plop him over here, and paint him up as a kobold priest.
Yeah.
Suddenly he's a kobold priest. He's got the armor. He's got all the exact same stat blocks. The only difference is now he has the ability to disengage and hide as a bonus action. Is that kobolds?
That's goblins.
That's goblins.
Kobolds have pack tactics.
Oh yeah. So now you have a priest with pack.
And they have cool voices like this. They have cool voices like this.
That's
I'm getting there.
We're kind of. I mean, I've been doing YouTube for a while now.
I know. I mean, my next character, Gary the intern.
No, I have a
my
patent pending on Gary the intern.
Oh.
Yeah, and you're not taking Gary the intern.
Gary the intern.
You can't just do that.
Well, my character Dratz has no
I'm
problem.
just not going to put you on my channel if you're going to do this stuff, Joe. All right, I think we've kind of like talked flies over.
Yep.
We've flown that out the horizon. We got to bring it back to something else. Our next spell we're going to talk about is anti-magic. Okay, so anti-magic doesn't work. This boom doesn't work. Why is that a problem?
So,
Obvious.
yeah. So we're talking about a very high level game.
Yes.
And you get the spell at 8. And what commonly happens is you have your badass mini boss spellcaster or your final boss spellcaster. It's usually a mage.
Or at least some magics.
And what happens is the wizard casts the anti-magic's field, runs up next to the other spellcaster, and
it's a quick beatdown. He's dead.
Yep.
It's over.
He's got no spells.
Right.
And all of his spell defenses that he had are instantly negated.
Right.
And then you have the monk go over there and
Mirror
grab
image,
him.
blink, with anything, mage armor, all gone.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And all he needs to do is maintain concentration on his anti-magic field, and the fight is basically over.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So
Anti-patterns.
Anti-patterns. Well, they're basically at this level, anything goes. There really aren't any sort of anti-patterns.
Because we're talking like a super high level game.
Yeah, you're talking super high. And Dungeons and Dragons kind of breaks down a little at high level.
Oh, absolutely.
So a lot of...
A little? It breaks down a little?
No.
The designers were like, after level 12, they're just like, you know what? Whatever.
I have run high level campaigns that are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
They're perfectly fine, and they hold together minus summon creatures problem. But we have a solution for that too.
Yeah, we do.
Stay tuned. Yeah. So in anti-magic, the name of the game is breaking the concentration of the wizard.
Right.
And to break concentration...
With the cleric, I think clerics get it too.
Yeah.
But anyway, good point.
You need to break the concentration. That's really the only way out of this.
Yeah.
Or move. So, if you're designing your final baddie, you have to give him the ability to move. A special form of movement that isn't reliant on magic.
Yeah.
So that he can get out of an anti-magic field fairly quickly. That's a simple solution. We're dealing with a high-level campaign.
Yeah.
This could fall into the area of an anti-pattern, but you're so high level that this wizard has been evil for very long, and he's got to have figured out how to deal with this problem.
Right. He's got to have thought this through.
Yeah.
He's got to be prepared for it.
Yeah, because Elminster would have walked in ages ago and stomped him dead.
Yeah.
Okay, move or break his concentration. Now, concentration is a weird thing. We're going to... but there are lots of ways of breaking concentration.
But it's hard. Experientially, I can tell you that, I can very rarely break my player's concentration. It's a hard thing to do.
There's a lot of ways to do it. But primarily the way you try to break their concentration is through direct damage. Mm-hmm. Right? But let me tell you, a fireball is not going to break concentration.
No, it's only an average of 23 damage or something.
Yeah, 23 damage,
pathetic.
and then so half that damage is the Constitution save that they need to roll.
They're going to make that all day long.
Yep.
12 or 13, no problem.
Yeah. So what you need is better direct damage.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where your rogue comes into play. So like positioning extra wizards, in the battle to deal with fly or deal with other spells.
Yeah.
Add a rogue.
You have a glass cannon that can just be like.
Yeah, and he could be waiting. He could be just a mook like the assassin. I mean, he's a CR7. You're having probably a CR18 wizard.
Yeah.
Have him wait to deal with the situation. There's other direct damage things such as traps or a device that the wizard has to deal direct damage in this context.
Silence.
Yes.
So why is silence a problem?
Same reason anti-magic is a problem. The only problem is silence is level 2.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So but unlike anti-magic, it is stationary. So silence does not move with the caster.
It's a good radius, though. What is it? A 20-foot radius?
20-foot radius.
That's a big radius. That's an entire 40-foot room.
Yeah. So a 40 by 40 room, you can basically lock it down, prevent the spellcaster.
Yeah.
All you need to do is prevent the spellcaster from moving out of that. Also, silence has the utility effect of stealthing through dungeons and preventing alarms. But I don't know if shutting that particular application down is
Because you got to cast it so many times, you know, because it's stationary. You can't cast it on, say, your coffee mug and then carry it with you. It's got to be a stationary point.
Yep.
Right.
So some of the anti-patterns for this is always counterspelling them, always shutting them down, anti-magic fields.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that for most of these spells, an anti-pattern is going to be counterspelling.
Yeah.
Or anything that just shuts them down out of the gate.
Yeah, if it's always the situation that there's a wizard in the group of monsters that you're fighting. We're fighting oozes. Why is there a wizard ooze?
Wizard ooze. I'm actually going to use that. That's like so unexpected and illogical that it's clever almost. You know what I mean?
It has a little hat and wand.
It ate a wizard. Now it has its head and wand. It's like, woo.
Gains its powers. Oh, this could be fun.
That's actually an awesome character idea. I like that idea, actually.
All right. So silence is also a concentration spell, so concentration effects can end it. Other anti-patterns.
Yeah.
So pulling out the Horn of Loudness, or some sort of magical item they happen to have that just makes them immune. Or
how does that work? Like, what do you mean? I'm not familiar with that. I've only been a dungeon master since high school, and you've been one since middle school, so apparently you know more than me.
So age-old magic item was a basic blowhorn that you could use to call through silence. Now, if that thing suddenly shows up in your game because you're frustrated with the silence thing, you should probably not do that.
Yeah, it's a little, yeah.
Not to mention, they'll also take it and
unless it like crumbles and doesn't work once the enemy's dead.
You don't do that either.
Why? It's awesome.
So,
the enemies have awesome magic items that break when the players touch them.
Yeah.
So
what I like doing is giving the enemies spells that are very detrimental to themselves, like blood magic, So super powerful spell, but if you use it, you lose half your hit points.
Okay.
Here, players, you can have it.
We are benevolent.
Yes. Yeah. You can play with that one twice.
That's awesome.
So dealing with silence. So you could always have bigger rooms.
But 40 by 40 is already a big room.
It is big.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to have your guy have some sort of movement capability. If this is a boss or a mini boss, he's got to have some sort of movement capability to keep him out of the silent sphere. He's the wizard. He's gotta stay out that. So,
and I would argue that even not barring silence, just in general, any sort of mini boss or boss, movement and being able to position yourself on the map with ease is key to avoiding lots of problems that an enemy would run into. You know what I mean? Not to get surrounded and pounded and be dead in like 1 or 2 rounds.
Yeah, the grapple build, right?
Sure.
Someone is always tying your guy. But if he has something like Misty Step, or well, it wouldn't work in silence. But there's the power that transmutation mages have, which can teleport. It's just a class power.
Okay. I'll trust you.
Cloak of the Mountebank.
Monty Bank?
Mountebank?
Is it Monty Bank or Monty Back?
I have no idea.
Let us know down in the comments, folks.
Yep. English, second language.
Yeah, our first language. What's your first language?
Probably C++.
My first language is barbarian.
Right.
Okay, so backup spells.
Right.
There
So
you go.
backup spells. So always include a spell on your spell list that has no verbal component, or have a character build that specifically allows you to have a silent spell. I believe the Arcane Trickster and the Sorcerer both have elements that allow you to not
Yeah, I think it's
not have a verbal component.
subtle spell. I believe is a sorcerer. What do they call it? Meta magic.
Yeah.
That will let you cast it where you don't use one of the 3 things.
So it's common enough in the Dungeons and Dragons world, because it's like a second level ability that characters can get, that your monsters can have it too. One thing we talked about was when silence is used for like stealth and things like that. But if the guards are sitting there and all of a sudden the room goes silent, I mean, too quiet.
Way too quiet.
It's way too quiet. I can't even hear myself breathe. Quiet.
They're gonna start looking around like, what is going on?
Yeah. And they're going to freak because this is very unnatural.
Yeah.
And so always play that part out in your silent spell if it's being used too much in getting past guards, sneaking through your dungeon, making sure every encounter goes totally quiet.
Right.
Play that out. Have the guards panic and run. You know, they're up against magic, so they don't know what caliber of magic they're up against. They could book it.
Yeah. Yeah, or sound an alarm, or at the very least, they're going to be on the alert, and any advantage your rogue gained from being in total silence is lost, because now they're really alert, and they're basically in combat rounds, looking around like, well, I'm about ready to attack something because this is not right. Next spell is Hypnotic Pattern.
Oh, yeah.
So why is Hypnotic Pattern a problem?
So, area of effect. Spell, I believe, 20-foot radius.
Sounds about right.
And everybody in that radius has to make a wisdom save, which is, everybody knows monsters don't have the highest wisdom. If they had high wisdom, they would have insight into their life, and they would probably stop being monsters and become bankers. That's where all the money's at, you know.
That's fair.
And you can be just as cruel.
That's a good point.
If it is cast as the first spell of the round, the monsters are all clustered together, 20-foot radius. They have to be in a really big room for them not to be caught in this thing. And boom. Chances are half of your monsters are going to fail their save.
At least half.
Yeah.
Maybe more.
Yeah. And maybe more.
Because the DC could be like a 13 or a 15 when it's being cast, and their wisdom save could be a 0. And so they have a 75% chance of failing. You know?
Right.
So you could have 5 monsters, all of them but 1 are like hypnotized, incapacitated, can't do anything.
Yep. And it could short circuit your encounter.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because the players go in, they kill the one that's not, they go to the next one, surround and pound, move on to the next one, surround and pound. And the whole time, all the bard has to do, it's usually a bard that casts this, is just concentrate on the spell.
Yeah. And give them inspiring
Encouraging
words. You
Come
can
on,
do
guys,
it.
you can do it.
You can totally take out the guys that aren't even paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a problem. It just short circuits encounters. Encounters are just kind of, whatever.
Yep, it's totally done. And
Yep.
you could have spent time, building this encounter, and next thing you know, all your monsters are hypnotized.
Okay.
Well,
yeah, so why don't we just, give everybody resistance to charm, or like anti-charm spells, Hypnotic Pattern doesn't work,
Right.
and just kind of totally shut it down.
so that would be the anti-pattern. So you don't want to flat out take it out, because the player has it on his spell list.
Yeah.
He wants to use it. It is cool, and it can be fun and can be effective. But what we want to make sure is that the action economy isn't always highly unbalanced. So what I'm saying is, if it takes one action of a player to cast the spell, how many actions of the monsters does it take to undo the spell? And if it's not undoable, then that balance is way off.
Right.
If it takes 4 actions, that balance is still way off. At best, you want a monster to waste his action undoing the spell, but you don't want to do better than that. You don't want it to be a free action or a bonus action to undo the spell.
Right. I've always argued that Hypnotic Pattern is hands down one of the very best low-level spells you can get.
Yeah.
Just because of its ability to totally invalidate an encounter.
Yeah. The only problem is it doesn't work on like undead or a couple other categories.
Undead aren't immune to charm.
They aren't?
No, not in 5th edition.
Oh.
They used to be immune to mind-controlling effects.
Okay.
Like in previous editions. 5th edition, it's kosher, dude.
Oh no. So super powerful, affects a lot of people, except those who are immune to charm.
Yeah, which isn't that many. Constructs it won't work in constructs. Constructs are immune to charm mostly, I think. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. So, so the objective here is to balance things out. At best case, you have one action that basically undoes the hypnotic pattern. Now, if that one action always is coming up, the players will call you out and think that this is unfair because it's always basically it's a useless spell. So let their hypnotic pattern work sometimes.
But not all the time. But what's like how would you undo it though? Like what's the way to with one action to get your monsters out of it?
So hypnotic pattern suggests two ways of getting a person out of hypnotic pattern. Do they get a save every round? No.
No,
Yeah.
they don't. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, that is part of the problem.
But if they take damage, then they come out of it.
So it's take damage or another action
somebody shakes you with an action. Yeah,
shakes you awake.
Yeah.
So what happens is if they cast the spell and they get 3 out of 4 of your monsters, you can do the wake chain.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, wake up, buddy!
Which is one monster running to the other monster, wake him up. That monster then runs to the next monster, wakes him up.
Yeah.
And if their initiative plays out in a good order, you can wake up your guys fairly quickly. Now
that alludes to rolling individual initiative in that case.
Yeah.
For each monster. So perhaps you normally roll monster initiative in groups of monsters, but in the case where they actually get hypnotic patterned, you roll each one's initiative separately to see how well your wake up chain works.
Right.
Okay.
But here you're still saying like if I have 4 monsters, I just use 3 actions against one player's action, which gives the players it's effectively a surprise round.
Yes. It's a very good use of a spell if that's what they get out of it. Yeah.
So that's really good. Alternate ways of dealing with this is having monsters outside of the AoE. So spells like hold person and the ones that are save or suck completely in the encounter.
Yeah.
What you can always do is throw extra monsters hiding on the outside and just kind of double your monster count.
Right.
So it was originally a medium encounter. Now you have 4 extra monsters in the fight. It throws it up to deadly or something like that, or maybe 2 extra monsters, throw it up to hard. But you can do that pretty easily on the fly.
We're talking about having not all of the monsters be within the area of effect. And I think one thing that I learned fairly early when I started doing 5th edition was, just in general, having monsters clustered together is a bad idea. Hypnotic pattern, but also fireball and other effects like that. So like spread your monsters out a little bit in waves. You know what I mean? Have the monsters are here, but there's monsters in the next room and this room. And when the battle breaks out here, these doors open and more monsters come in. And that could be part of the encounter design.
Yep.
So the hypnotic pattern, those guys, great. But these guys are alerted and then come in.
The nice thing too is having oddly shaped rooms. If you have symmetrical rooms or wide open rooms, gets kind of boring. If you throw in like lots of little walls, nooks and crannies, alcoves, it gives creatures places to hide behind the thing, and if they have total cover, they might not be affected by it. So the other suggestion is plant the wizard plant, right? So one of your baddies is secretly a wizard, very low level wizard, and all he needs to do is cast a spell to undo the effect. Now, could be dispel magic, right? That's a 3rd level spell.
Yeah.
There's an easier way, and that's magic missile.
Yeah. It's not that much damage, but
first level spell, 1d4 plus 1 to 3 targets of your choice. You can upcast it to get additional targets. You instantly wake up all your buddies.
Yeah.
And then you've hit that perfect one action undoes the one action over here. Now, if this happens every time, it gets annoying.
Right.
But
you can't always do that. Right.
But you'd surprise your player, and they'd be like, "Oh no, it didn't work," and now we have a fight on our hands.
Yeah. But sometimes when you have overused spells and overused patterns by your players, all it takes is 1 or 2 times of having the enemies like counter it in a unique way for your players to then they get off the bandwagon of using that spell all the time.
Yep.
And they start to use it more reasonably, and then you don't have to counter it in these ways quite as much.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, exactly. So there is an argument that monsters won't recognize. Don't know every spell in the book.
Yeah.
Especially at low levels, some goblins sitting around. But in general, these magic effects are there. Hypnotic pattern is so popular that that they probably have heard of it. Obviously, they've heard of Fireball.
So what we're saying is that in the game world, Hypnotic Pattern is such a useful spell that it gets used a lot. So people and monsters just kind of know about its existence. And so when all of your friends, when there's a shiny bunch of colors, and all of your friends are just like, woo, you know what happened. And if you were unaffected, you know to go shake your buddies out of it.
Right.
So it's just a commonly known effect.
Right. But one could argue that it would require an arcane check. And in that case, what you can do is you can have the monsters all roll an untrained arcane check to see if they can identify it.
Yeah.
But for common effects, they might not be able to pinpoint the spell, but they could probably identify the effect. Because Hypnotic Pattern, there's a whole Fey race that is basically built around charm and illusion. And so they're familiar with fairies and things of that nature.
Because we're talking about a magical world where people grew up in this and they hear these tales and stuff, right?
Yeah. And so there's a high probability they recognize it, but if you really feel the necessary to give it a random element, throw the d20, and for each one of your monsters, give them an unskilled arcane check at the basic DC for identifying spells.
And then if they pass it, they know how to get their friends out of it, basically. Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Next spell on our list, Darkness and Fog.
Yes.
Why is that a problem?
All right. Specifically, I was running a campaign. I have a little story. I was running a campaign.
Okay, story.
Rise of the Rune Lords. We were in the 5th module, 4th module, somewhere around there, and the major bad guy had these things called fog cutter lenses.
Okay.
And what this allowed him to do was cast a fog spell and see through the fog. Easy peasy.
Seems reasonable.
Yep.
It's a bad guy. He's got a cool magic item.
Yep,
Sure.
he's got a cool magic item. Well, the encounter was very fun, and the battles went on for a long period of time because it was really hard to find him in the fog, and they had to area effect him down, and it was a lot of fun. Now my player got the lenses.
Yeah, one player with those lenses is not a big deal.
Right. But me kind of being new to the whole Pathfinder universe, didn't think much of this particular pattern, and so he went back and he went to an artificer and had these relatively they were common magic item worth 1,000 gold pieces, and replicated it for his friends.
Oh, geez. So the whole party had this.
Yeah, and
you could see through fog.
Yeah, you could see through fog.
Okay.
And I'm just like, well, I might be able to deal with this. Let's go with it. Let's see what happens.
Until the wizard starts casting fog for every battle.
Yeah, as a 2nd level spell.
Yeah.
And a 3rd level. In Pathfinder, there was a 2nd level, 3rd level, 4th level, and 5th level fog versions.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so there was like acid fog and solid fog and like all sorts of fog.
Yeah.
And so every single encounter we came to, we had the monsters being fogged.
Yep.
Players run in, kill the monsters who can't see nothing.
Yeah.
And it was basically over. And rinse, repeat, and effectively what we ended up with was a very, very boring game.
So exact same encounter mechanic. Your players are doing the exact same thing over and over again. Now, so it was probably boring for the dungeon master. Did you sense that your players were getting bored with it?
Yeah. So the player who was casting the fog spell thought he was, I'm clever. I'm super powerful. I'm really like the cat's meow, right? All the other players were just kind of sitting there, kind of, all right, well, chop, right? And they were getting highly disengaged. Yeah. One player was kind of having fun with it, but even that player, after a while, it was becoming so rote that it was very boring. Yeah. So fortunately, I did the first thing that you can do when there's an overpowered, serious imbalance in the game. Yeah. And that was talk to my players. Right. And I was like, look, this technique is very effective. It's very, very effective. I don't have a counter for this, except for some...
Just taking them away from you or something.
Right. But
just shutting you down.
People breaking your glasses or something. Yeah. I mean, I could do these things, but really I want to ask to, please come up with a new strategy and let's actually play and have fun. Right. As opposed to just kind of stomping everything to death. And there was no rise in action. No one was getting hurt.
Right. Yeah. That's a classic example of just solving a problem by talking to your players, and then I'm assuming you guys came to an agreement, and then you went on with the game and weren't using those tactics or something, right?
Yep. And in Pathfinder, we actually we started forming a list of overpowered items. And if you use them, it was frowned upon.
Okay.
And so we have a shun list.
You shunned the players.
No, shun list.
You didn't shun from the game to leave.
Yeah, no. So if the player, like for instance, the summoner, could summon thousands of monsters, well, we shunned that because it would slow down the game for everybody else, and it wasn't fun, which we'll talk about a little bit more later.
Yeah. So you give an example basically of fog cloud lenses and stuff, right? But without those lenses, why is fog cloud and darkness a problem?
So it's specifically a problem when you can see through that darkness, and it's an easy thing to get. Second level warlock can get Devil Sight, which allows him to see through magical darkness. Yeah. And he will also be able to cast a darkness spell at, twice an hour. Yeah. So he can do it all the time.
Yeah. So he can cast darkness, see through it, and like ping things with his Eldritch Blast or whatever, and kill stuff. Right.
And this is annoying. It's actually, I don't know if it's worse this way, because the one player is now taking on the whole encounter himself. Yes. Being highly effective, but the other players are lost in the darkness.
They can't see. Right, exactly.
Right.
It's frustrating.
And so one player is stealing all the light with darkness, and the other player
Oxymoron.
and the other players are basically doing nothing.
Right.
They're just like, I shoot magic missile at the darkness.
I think that happened in our game once, where one of our players was these warlocks, and he was casting darkness, and he could see through it, and he was pinging stuff. And I remember the paladin player at least once got frustrated, and he's like, "Look, stop casting darkness because we can't see through it, and it's frustrating us." I think I knew who that player was too.
The anti-patterns with dealing with the fog and banish is having a monster that with the exact same ability, Devil Sight. You could throw it in there on occasion, but it's not going to work. Yeah. Some monsters do have
blind sight,
true vision,
true sight.
Mm-hmm.
That's high level,
but that's very high level, and we're talking about a second level spell here. Right. So, having more creatures with true sight or something like that, throwing in anti-magic fields, that's bad.
Or just always having a light spell that can counter it or something.
Right.
And daylight spell or something.
Yeah. So suddenly your dungeon is illuminated by daylight spells on a permanent basis. Yeah, right.
It's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
There. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot simpler ways of dealing with that, and one of them is always stashing some monsters in here that can throw a monkey wrench into this plan, by having a wizard with a counter spell or dispel magic, or dancing lights. Now, I know what you're thinking, right?
What am I thinking?
Yeah, dancing lights, first level spell. It says right in darkness that spells of second level and lower cannot dispel darkness.
It has to be higher.
However,
no,
dancing
there's
light.
No, however, it doesn't work, dude.
Yeah. No, but however, you can upcast Dancing Lights as a third level. You use this third level slot.
Because when you upcast a spell, it actually becomes that spell level.
Yep.
So you use a third level slot for Dancing Lights, and then it gets rid of the darkness.
Right. So a very, very common spell can dispel that very quickly. Other thing to note in the darkness spell is darkness says that it snuffs out normal light and spells of second level and lower. Right. However, it doesn't say it snuffs out magical light. So that means all of your magic swords, your magic candles.
Because those aren't actually magical. Those aren't magical spells. Those aren't light spells.
Right.
They're just magical light.
Right. They're just magical light.
Okay.
And so if somebody pulls out that sun sword illuminates that perfectly fast. And I believe in Xanathar, there's a magic candle that produces light, which give you a little bit of light, but
sure, yeah,
probably not a whole lot, if it works at all, because it might actually not produce magical light. It might say it produces normal light, but but magical light is an option. Another thing that the darkness spell says is the fact that it's originating from a point. So it's like a torch, except it's emanating darkness.
So you can cover it up?
So you can cover it up.
Cover it up.
So one of the things that people do is cast darkness on their sword, sheathe their sword so that they can walk around freeze. And then when they get into the fight, they unleash their darkness for free.
Right.
But that same thing goes if the monster has a cloak or something like that, he can try to wrap the sword as possibly some sort of athletics check. But that said, you can cover it up. It emanates. So put it behind a wall, put some cover right there. So there's ways of blocking that darkness. At higher levels, you can use things like walls and stuff.
Yeah.
Fog. The nice thing in 5th edition, I don't think there's any way to see through fog except for with like True Sight, Blind Sight.
Yeah.
So there are critters with those abilities. But by and large, the players will be having as difficult of a time with fog as they will be, as the monsters will be.
Right. It's
So
even
pretty
Steven.
fair.
It's even Steven at that point. Yeah.
It
It's
is.
nothing to worry about.
Just don't introduce fog cutting lenses.
Don't do that. Okay, so we're talking about Banishment.
Yeah. So Banishment is probably the worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst.
Well, Hypnotic Pattern's way up there, but Banishment gets
it's bad.
yeah. Counterspell can get a little annoying, but
Okay, but let's focus. Banishment.
Banishment. So the problem is like Hypnotic Pattern, Banishment can lower the DC of the encounter really fast because always when you're banishing, you always banish the big bad.
Sure.
The problem with banish is that it removes the guy from play. He doesn't get a save.
Well, he gets a save initially.
Yeah, he
There's
gets a save.
one save, and it's a charisma save.
Yes.
Usually not going to make it.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he doesn't get an ongoing save each round.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
at higher levels, you start seeing monsters with higher charismas, like angels and demons and things, dragons. But at lower levels, it just isn't there, and you get the spell like as low as 7th level. So it enters your game fast, and you might not be prepared to deal with it.
Right, because we're saying we have like a big bad, and there are a bunch of mooks. And so they banish the big bad, he's gone, they clean up the mooks, and then they surround the spot where the big bad's going to come back. They release the banishment spell, they have ready actions, he pops back in, and then they're just like, and he's dead.
Yep.
And you have just shortcutted the encounter, made it an easy boss fight, and that awesome, cool battle you had planned is just dead in the water.
Yep. And they can rinse and repeat this.
Right.
Okay, so problems with Banishment. We've talked about the problems with Banishment. Let's talk about anti-patterns for dealing with Banishment.
Right. So the easiest way to deal with banishment is do the Ravenloft thing. Right? Forbid it.
You can't banish things.
You can't banish things and forbid.
Can we just do that for every problem the players cause in the game? Just forbid it?
We should and likely should prevent them from doing anything even remotely harming our monsters because they're precious.
Do we need our players at that point? Can we just tell them to go home?
Yeah, actually, at this point, we probably should just be reading them a story or a book because we've taken away all their choices and options.
Yeah, you have no agency whatsoever anymore, so
Right.
just listen to me tell you a nice story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we all know that we love story time. No.
Actually, those are some of my best performing videos.
What?
They are. Storytime videos. Okay, anyway, so don't just shut them down.
Right. Don't just shut them down. Now, yeah, Ravenloft has a story reason to disallow it, but if you do the same thing in your, Faerun world or,
or an entire dungeon where banishment isn't allowed, or
Right.
or a series of dungeons or something. Yeah.
Right. You've effectively had the character take a player option. That player option is on their character sheet. They want to use it. It is a useful spell. It's a very useful spell.
Yeah.
But you're effectively saying, no, I won't let you use something that's taking up a slot on your character sheet.
Right.
Which is not fun for any player. So don't just flat out disallow it. You can work with this. You can work with banishment. It is a little tricky, but you can do it.
Right. Okay. Okay. So how do we work with banishment? Like, how do you deal with that? Let's say your players are always doing the scenario we said, where they banish the boss, deal up the minions, and then the boss comes back, or they cut encounters in half. You have 2 Remorazes, right? They banish the first one. They kill the second one easily because it's now a super easy encounter.
Yep.
And then when the second one comes back, they just kill it real quick. I mean, how do you deal with that sort of thing?
Banishment has a concentration component, so all the things we talked about with concentration apply here.
Yep.
In fact, you have all of those spells, such as command, to say, I command you to release that. So if you have a wizard or spellcaster available in the combat, they can end that pretty quickly through the concentration component. The other realistic scenario to this, add a monster. They banished one, you pop in a new one. Yes, you've increased the encounter of the DC.
Yeah.
But you have now just restored balance to the whole encounter, except for that wizard who is concentrating on that spell to keep that to keep that other banished monsters out.
Yeah.
So that's a fairly easy way to deal with it. We also talked about adding mages to the encounter so that they can do things like dispel magic.
Right. Yeah.
And taking care of it that way. But that can get a little heavy-handed if you do that all the time.
Well, if you do any of these things all the time, right? So,
Right.
like, sometimes let the banishment work, let them have their fun, but other times you need to do things so that it doesn't just allow them to cheese through every encounter.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's also a loophole in banishment for certain monsters. Certain monsters are native to a different plane, right? And sometimes those monsters have the ability to plane shift.
Right.
So they could be banished back to their home plane only to come back.
Right.
Plane shift right back the next round.
Yeah.
And restore the game. But that's higher level and not totally common.
Yeah, it's not super common. Right.
Or you could come up with some other mechanism.
Yeah.
Such as if there are demons in your dungeon, well, maybe there's a demon gate. Right? And so the players are running around banishing all the demons. Well, what's really happening is they're stocking up in the final room.
No, because they're coming back.
Yeah,
Or the
they're
demon gate coming. Yeah.
Coming back through the demon gate, right? Which could be a hilarious problem. And a very, very
Remember us? You banished all of us before.
Yeah, you're not going to get us again.
There's a glowing portal behind them.
Yeah. Which could be fun and also a major card played.
Yeah.
I would suggest if you're going to do that, add a clue somewhere where the players can find it to suggest that this might be the case so that they're not... You have to foreshadow super DM screw jobs or they're just flat out screw jobs.
Right, but if there's a hint, there are hints that it's coming, that it's there, and they can prepare for it, then it's like, well, you guys, you knew about this.
Yeah, there was a demon gate.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen when you banished all the demons?
They just come back to the last room.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, that's fun.
Okay, so the last one we're going to talk about is Conjuration, summoning, conjure animals, animate objects, that whole class of things where it allows you to basically take, your 5-person crew and turn it into a 10-person crew or a 15-person crew.
Right. And so the major problem with this is it bogs down the game. Just next thing you know, you're rolling 15 dice.
Yeah.
Trying to get through one player's turn. It takes like a half hour. And
right. And while you're running all of your summons, the other 4 players are on their phones building dice. They're just bored out of their minds.
Right.
Because it takes you forever to resolve your turn.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those situations. This is one of those situations that you really should talk to your player about because summons can ruin the game. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things you can bring up with them, maybe some solutions in that conversation. But first we want to talk about the anti-pattern.
Right.
Right. And don't ever do this. The enemy summoner. So the players have a summoner running around the dungeon. And so what do you do to counter that is you add a summoner yourself.
That bogs it down more.
Right.
It's
like twice as bad.
Yeah.
And so they're running around with their conjure animals. What was it? It was a Pathfinder game. In this Pathfinder game, we had if you cast Summon Monster, you can select to summon 1d3 plus 1 monsters of 2 tiers lower or something.
Okay.
And so we had the one summoner casting this spell over and over again. So he had like 12 creatures running around.
Yeah.
So my summoner was casting similar things and it was having 12 more creatures. And we ended up with something like 40 miniatures on the table. Oh, gosh. And we're not playing Warhammer. We're not,
Yeah.
we got into a full-on army versus army battle, and
the Dungeons and Dragons game system was not made for that.
Right.
Right, and that's going to turn into like a multi-session bogfest.
Yeah.
At that point, you almost just want to be like, okay, look, can we just talk this through? Let's just say that your side wipes out my side, and let's just go at it with our original characters.
Right. It's nullified, right?
Yeah.
The Conjuration spell counters the Conjuration spell, maybe.
Yeah. So that's an anti-pattern. Don't do that.
Yeah, definitely. Unless, of course, you've talked with your players and say that if you cast Conjuration and I cast Conjuration, we assume that our monsters are fighting. It's Conjuration as the counter to Conjuration.
Sure. Okay.
But you have to talk with your players.
Yeah.
So with the things that do work and that deal with this quite neatly is talk to your players. Just always resort to this one. Talk to them. Ask them, hey, can you stop summoning the maximum amount of creatures and instead summon the one creature because it's slowing down the game. You have to explain how it's slowing down the game and is causing problems in that way.
And you might, you might let that happen once or twice so that they can experience the slowdown.
Right.
And then kind of explain and say, look, I know you were having fun, but you might have noticed all of the rest of the players were bored out of their minds.
Right.
So this is the part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and when you're talking with them, you can also incentivize the deal, right? And it's a system I like to call named monsters.
Okay.
So instead of summoning just random monsters from the ethereal plane, you've studied and researched the name of an actual critter from another world, and you can summon this particular one in. So, for instance, if you were a druid using conjure animals, you could get this dire bear who maybe has an extra power of like some bonus power. Additionally, with the named monster, you can begin to equip them with armor and give them some barding and things like that. So when they're unsummoned, they teleport back with their stuff to be resummoned.
And you're always bringing that back, that same summon.
Yeah,
and you have to research its name so that you know the name of it to summon it. And it sounds like in this rule, you don't allow them to just summon unnamed things. They have to research it first to be able to summon it, right? But and then of course that summoned creature is a little more powerful, right, than it would be otherwise. But you're getting rid of the game down element,
right?
And you might have to accommodate it by increasing the challenge of the encounter a little bit potentially. But at least you're not bogging things down.
So one of the things with summoning a ton of creatures is you get huge action economy.
Yeah.
Right? And you're effectively taking you want to get rid of that. Okay. You want the player to have a small amount of action. So him plus his summon.
Right.
So really you're asking him to take a pretty big hit on the summon spell.
Okay, I guess you're saying.
And what we're doing is we're incentivizing back up to the summon's original potential by giving them a little extra bonuses here and there.
That makes sense.
So work with the player. Heck, you might even come up with like cool custom monster that he can pull in up to his design.
Now, since you're summoning, is there any risk inherent to this? Like if you learn the name of that summon and he gets killed in combat,
right?
Is he like dead?
So you can play it that way.
Okay.
And historically speaking, that's the way we used to play. So in Pathfinder and in 3.5, summoning became such a problem that it basically enforced this named monster rule. And when the named monster died, you had to use another named monster in order to bring him back because that creature was slain on this plane and did not go back to the whatever realm they came from.
It's a special rule for summons then, whereby they don't just get a free pass on it.
Right. And so it starts becoming important that your summons aren't just meat shields or hit point pools for you to use, which is kind of the problem that the druid is. The druid is a giant hit point bag all by himself, and then he can summon a whole bunch of more hit point bags, which is very hard to deal with. However, if you're not interested in that, another solution for summoned monsters, and when there's lots of tiny monsters, resort to AoE. Give your goblin some explosives. What's better in a dungeon than a ton of explosives? Everybody loves explosives.
Yeah, explosive barrels, like a big barrel, just roll that down the hall.
Honestly, I had an entire dungeon filled with explosive barrels because I thought it was hilarious. And so the monsters were using them, the players were using them, explosions going off everywhere. Everybody had a blast. Pun. Sorry. But no, it was just rip-roaring laughter.
Yeah.
And, I just stole it straight out of Half-Life.
Yeah.
For the random explosive barrels all over the place.
Okay.
But I thought it would be fun, and it really turned out to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for one dungeon, but you can't do that every dungeon.
Actually, I always throw hazards into dungeons.
Yeah.
Because they're always fun.
Right.
An acid pool, the players might step in it, but they can also shove the monsters into it. It's just
or they could bottle it and then throw it.
Yep.
Yeah.
They could drink from it and realize that was a bad idea.
Okay, I'll drink from it.
You see a pool of water in a dungeon. What do you do? Also, to deal with the large numbers of monsters, what you could do is suggest to your player that instead of individual monsters, you could summon swarms. And then you could use the stat blocks for the swarms instead. Yeah. Which I think they deal automatic damage, and so it speeds up a lot of things.
It simplifies it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. You might have to come up with some custom swarm stat blocks for certain things. But that's arguably less work than and better for the game than dealing with just tons of individual monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look in the back of the dungeon monster manual, you'll see stats for a bat and then a swarm of bats. Right? So you can kind of get a gauge as to what stat block might be appropriate for your dagger versus a swarm of daggers. Right?
Okay. For anime objects.
Yeah, in an animated object.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Let me know down below which spells cause problems in your games and how you deal with them. Next week, I'll be talking about metagaming in D&D and why looking at monster stat blocks as a player is a problem. But until then, click right here to learn spellcasting tricks you can use as a Dungeon Master. And until next time, let's play D&D.